This is the Good Government Show.
So it's a different way of working. Instead of working in silos, you have to move towards more of an ecosystem type of approach, especially when capacity is limited. And that could mean working with other partners outside of government. There are people that are very attached to the old system. It works for them. They fear change. They don't like anything new. They don't know if they'll have the same security in a new model. Maybe their job might change. So change is very uncomfortable. You have to help people through that change process. If we can anticipate and make sense of a shifting landscape, we can make better decisions for the future. And perhaps we don't have to respond to as many crises. Maybe we can be positioned in a better place for society.
The future, we're all going to live in it. The question is, how do you plan for it? Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm Dave Martin. First, help us share the message of good government by liking us and sharing us where we are on Facebook, X, YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Please share our show with your friends and review us where you're listening. And join our Good Government Show community. Check out our website for the link. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the future. My guest is Donna Dupont. She's a futurist. I'm sorry, no crystal ball, no predictions, so put all those betting slips away. But what she does is help governments plan for the future. When we hear about governments hiring an outside consultant, oftentimes the reaction is, well, why are we spending all this money to hire someone to do the job our leaders are supposed to do? Donna Dupont will explain the best consultants work with their government partners, bringing outside expertise and an outsider viewpoint to help governments do better. That can mean a long-term future strategy or setting milestones that are flexible. And being from Canada, we discuss the differences between working with American governments and Canadian governments. So let's head to the Great White North and hear from futurist Donna Dupont. Discover how leading government and education organizations are revolutionizing their operations through cloud-powered transformation. Join Amazon Web Services at AWS Imagine for Education, State, and Local Government in Chicago on July 29th and 30th for an immersive exploration of public sector cloud solutions. Experience hands-on technical demonstrations, participate in over 20 specialized sessions, and collaborate with over 500 industry leaders. Envision what's possible for your organization. Register now at aws.amazon.com/government-education/imagine, and we'll see you in Chicago. What if World War I never happened? What if these three royal cousins, King George of England, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, and Tsar Nicholas of Russia, chose peace over pride? Good Government Show executive producer Jim Ludlow has just released a new book. The Royal Cousins is a gripping alternate history that imagines how diplomacy and courage could have stopped a war that took 22 million lives. If only they'd used the principles of good government. Download The Royal Cousins now on Kindle. It's powerful, timely, and just 99 cents. And all the proceeds support our work here on The Good Government Show. Just search The Royal Cousins on Amazon today. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm happy to have with me Donna Dupont of Purple Compass and from Canada. Welcome to the Good Government Show. Happy to have you.
Thank you, David, for the invitation.
Well, you're welcome. Now, you are in Canada. How are things going in Canada? We're recording this in the summer. We're having a heat wave. Is Canada having a heat wave?
Yes, we are. I'm in Montreal, Canada. Last couple of days, the heat index has been very high with the humidity, and we have warnings.
Canadians must be freaking out about really, really hot weather.
We are, and we have wildfire season, right? So it's we have to think about that in the north and our response agencies, in addition to just the heat and dealing with that and opening up cooling centers and just keeping people safe in times of extreme heat.
So we talked a little bit before we, turned the microphones on. And the first thing I need you to do is explain to me what you are. Apparently you are a futurist. What is a futurist?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I typically use the title foresight and design strategist, but I am a futurist in the sense that I'm part of the community of professional futurists. And so what I do is I help organizations, that's government and businesses, plan for a very complex and uncertain future.
How do you know the future?
Well, we don't predict the future. So
Okay.
it's all about understanding the changing landscape of what's happening and being able to build your anticipatory and adaptive leadership capabilities. So it's about not predicting the future. That's an old type of model of, we predict, we forecast, and then we act. This is more about understanding that there are big global drivers of change that are happening, that are impacting every industry around the world. And it's understanding that and making sense of that, and then relating it back to your organization and how your organization may need to adapt moving forward and make new decisions for the future.
So this is the Good Government Show. So we talk about people who are working in government, which you do. How is government at adapting to the future and planning for the future?
It's not easy. It's not easy, not just for government, for organizations across the board. This type of disruptive change that we're seeing around the world is very difficult for organizations that are very management focused, where they like predictability, they like to plan, they're preparing for the next quarter. This type of disruptive thinking is really impacting how people do business and what that could look like moving into the future. And that disruption is creating a lot of anxiety.
One of the things I know that governments have a hard time doing, and I've talked to a few government leaders who have come in and said, here's what we did. We made a 5-year plan. We made a 10-year plan. We made a 20-year plan. We never done that before. How vital is that?
Well, it's important to have a future forward vision, right? And ideally what you want is some sort of vision to pull you forward that's aspirational. Maybe it's based on values, principles that we need to shape, but you do need to have a pathway to reach that vision. And that could look like, 2, 3, 5, 10-year plans as stepping stones to achieve that. But recognize that when you have those 5-year plans, the planning is just a starting point. You need to understand the context that's changing on a dynamic basis, and that you might need to pivot some of those ideas based on what's happening. Some of them might need to defer, some might need to be re-examined, some might need to be pushed forward. So you need to have this agility of thinking as you're moving forward with your plans.
And how hard is that to explain to city planners, to city mayors, to county commissioners, to Monsieur le Maire?
It's not easy because a lot of us want certainty. We want certainty. We want to know, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how long it's going to take. This is how much it's going to cost. And this is when it's going to be done. And so that need for certainty, it's important to have that structure, but you need to then start to think, how could things potentially be disrupted? Could there be an issue with the supply chain that will impact, things that we need, resources we need to complete this project? Could there be a workforce disruption? Could there be a technology disruption? So you need to think a little broader in terms of what that could look like and start to think about how, if that were to happen, how you may need to pivot, right? So it's a different type of thinking competency for a very complex and uncertain world. And that's what we need to cultivate in today's society.
And do you plan for things like a pandemic or a worldwide pandemic? I suppose in Florida, you probably plan for, if they average 2 hurricanes in their city a year, then you plan for 2. Or do you plan for 3? If you're in California, do you plan for wildfires? You said you were in Canada in this wildfire season. If you typically have 2, do you plan for 3? How does that process work?
Well, it depends on the context, right? So there are agencies, emergency management agencies, that they're tasked for doing this type of preparedness planning for emergencies. However, right, these emergencies are getting more complex, and they're not just
more frequent, right? I mean, we're getting like 50-year storms
Absolutely.
every 20 years now, right?
Absolutely. So you need to have a sense, right, from a performance standpoint, from an organization's perspective, how is that environment changing? Are we seeing more frequency? Are we seeing more severity? Are we seeing mixed hazards potentially of two different hazards coming together to create a different level of vulnerability and risk. So these are some of the thinking that you need to undertake, right? And then you need to think about, okay, what's our capacity to be able to manage that? And where are the limits of that capacity? And then how do we collaborate in different ways to bolster our capacity? Or maybe we need to think about different ways of delivering this service moving into the future, because a model we have today is not sustainable if situations were to really escalate. So this is the type of disruptive, innovative type thinking that's necessary in today's world. And it's hard because a lot of us are in that very status quo, business as usual mindset. And it's not that isn't valuable. It is. We need that. But we need to almost have an ambidextrous view towards the future, where we have a management mindset and we have a disruptive, innovative mindset. And both of them need to align up at the leadership level in order to make good decisions today and for the future.
So let's just look a little bit at the world. We have climate change that's happening, that is affecting lots of environmental issues and weather and storms, etc. You have, I'll use your word, you have a disruptor in Washington, D.C. that's affecting, things that are happening around the world. How do you incorporate those two things into local planning?
So it's interesting because it's not done in isolation. It's done with usually teams, right? You're bringing different people together, and you need to scope in what the challenge is that you're looking at. So if we're looking at environmental challenges, climate change, and risk for local planning, you need to think about some of these broader geopolitical type of shifts and policies, right? And what that could mean, right? Downstream in terms of cascading consequences to that and your ability to respond, right? So this type of work is done usually not with one person trying to do all the research, but it's done with a team.
Except that there are small cities that have one person. Like you are the resiliency officer. You're it. You have a small emergency planning team, or some places don't have that. What do you tell them?
Well, it's about how you can work with others across who are doing similar type activities, so that you can bring your expertise together, but also combined resources. So it's a different way of working. Instead of working in silos, you have to move towards more of an ecosystem type of approach, especially when capacity is limited. And that could mean working with other partners outside of government. So private sector, citizen groups, nonprofits, there are different ways to look at it from an ecosystem perspective instead of just staying in our silos. Because we're all in our silos, but we're talking about really complex, interdependent challenges that need thinking, cross-thinking, and diversity of thinking in order to really address these issues.
So let's talk a little bit about what you just brought up, which is, governments hiring outside consultants. A lot of people hear, an outside consultant, it's going to cost more money. Why do we need an outside consultant to do that? We have our own department that handles that. Why spend the money to hire an outside consultant? What does an outside consultant bring to a city or to a government that they can't handle themselves?
Well, it depends on what type of service that you're looking for, right? So if you are looking for a type of service, right? So say foresight, design, future planning, and you need someone to help you with complexity, navigating the complexity, uncertainty, creating a safe space for dialogue, analyzing and making sense of all of this information to help inform strategy and policy. If you have that capability internally and you have the capacity to do it, fantastic, leverage it. But not everyone has that. So you need to think about, when you're looking for consultants, what is it I need this? What type of service do I need? How is this going to help the type of work that I'm doing, or to advance decision-making for strategy, for investment, for policy? Because the thing is that, yes, you can give, units this type of function and role, but do they have the experience to do it, right? So some do. Some governments around the world have been actively building this foundation and integrating foresight and future thinking into their work. So they're able to manage that internally because they found a model that works for them. But if you don't have that, then you can look to outside consultants to help you. But you want to be very clear about why, what the role is, and how that knowledge can be used to really advance action, right? You don't want knowledge that's sitting in a report on a shelf. No. You really want, right?
You want to take it and put it into action, which goes to my next question. How do you justify spending the money for an outside consultant when, city budgets, county budgets, state budgets are tight, and they're, especially when they're looking to cut. How do you justify spending the money when you are outside your comfort zone, or someone looks at a city budget and sees a line item and it's a lot of money for someone to come in and tell them how to do it?
Yeah. So you need to really create a proactive business case. And so you need to know why you're doing this. What is the risk of inaction and the consequences of no action, right? Or if no one's doing this, or it's not done well, right? Or in time. And especially in an emergency context, right? The consequences can be severe at the community level, at the civilian level, and it can cost a lot of money to react and respond in real time. To deploy emergency resources is expensive. And if people are losing their homes, if they're, not prepared, if they have to be evacuated, relocated, maybe it takes years to move back to their community. Maybe they don't have insurance. Maybe they can't access health services. So there's a lot of cascading risks. And so we don't think about the cost of inaction, right? We only think about, maybe that won't happen. So, we have to really check our assumptions about the future and do that proactive business case of, yes, we need this information because we need to make good decisions for the future. And if we choose not to, we can do that too, but we have to take accountability for our choices of deciding not to explore that and risking the consequences of that inaction and the costs. There will be downstream costs associated with that.
What do governments get wrong when they hire outside consultants?
What they get wrong is they don't look for consultants they can work with, that they can collaborate with. I think there needs to be a new relationship, the way government works with consultants. A lot of times consultants are brought in and everything is outsourced to them, and they're doing it in isolation, and then they present back a report. And government can't understand the language, what's in there. It doesn't necessarily resonate with their models or how they process information or how they move it forward. And so that disconnect can be a real big missed opportunity. So what I do is I work with a lot of my clients in government, and we make sure that as they're involved in the process in the terms of the project management side, so they understand the layers, what's happening. They're able to ask really good questions and making sure that at each stage of the process that we're collecting really valuable insights and how we're going to translate that knowledge into action. And so that is a different way, different model.
So the difference, what I think I understand you to say is they go about it in two ways. The wrong way is to go, here's our problem. Tell us how to fix it. Let us know when you've got an answer, as opposed to let's roll up our sleeves together and talk this whole process through so when we come to a conclusion, we both reach the same conclusion.
Absolutely. Or when you have the report, there's an understanding of that information, and that you can say, okay, we've got the report. Now we're going to do our internal part where we need to process information and move it up to see what we can take action on. And that's an internal government decision. But it's so important to have that kind of collaboration. And it's a different type of relationship for a complex system.
All right. So give me your best short elevator pitch for why a government should hire a futurist to work on their future plans.
Well, I think that pitching is not easy for me because I'm a more of an expression kind of person. But this is what I'm going to tell you, that right now there is a lot of distrust around the world, not just with government, but institutions globally.
Yes.
And people don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. They don't feel like their needs are being addressed. And there's a big opportunity here for government and business to rethink how they are moving into the future, how they are governing, their space, in the sense that how they're collaborating with civil society, how they're listening to the issues, and how they're working to address them, right? Moving into the future. And so I believe that governments, need to play a big role in bridging this type of communication with communities and a different way of governance. So we talk about as anticipatory governance in the future. And it's a type of future ready leadership that is understanding what's changing, what's moving, and is open to being very agile and adaptive and responding to the needs as they go forward, as opposed to being kind of caught in an old model and being disconnected from the reality that a lot of people are experiencing.
And what you're talking about, though, is not easy. It's quite hard. And especially when you're perhaps a smaller city or a county, or a more rural or poorer city or a county, they're sort of jumping from, like keeping the lights on. And you're talking about a 10-year plan considering, worldwide global geo-global conflict. How do you explain that to a smaller city or county, like I described, working with someone like yourself to come up with a plan?
Well, it's a paradigm shift. So the world is changing, right? Yeah. So if you are not thinking about those changes that are happening, like let's take technology, for example, that's rapidly changing. And so as government, if you are not part of that conversation, you're left behind, right? It is a paradigm shift. It's very difficult, and it's very difficult at the program level, or sometimes at the junior policy level. It has to be across entire organization, especially at the leadership level, where they have to be really invested in the future and about wanting to respond to the needs that are emerging, and want to ensure that they're able to continue to deliver good services, right?
Sure.
And so it's a paradigm shift. It's a complete shift in thinking, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes strong leadership, it takes strong governance, and it takes a commitment to say, okay, we're not going to disrupt and change everything overnight, but we know that how we're performing right now is under a lot of stress. And we need to start to think about how we may need to adapt. And we need to create space to have these type of structured, future-facing conversations so that we can come up with new ideas and new ways. And it doesn't have to look like a 10-year plan. It can be a 10-year vision with some milestones, but recognizing the plan is a starting point. You are going to adapt in real time. Anytime you implement,
and this is true for every size city, every size county, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even the federal government. I work a lot with federal departments in Canada and globally, and they also deal with the same challenge, right? Absolutely. It's not easy. It's a mindset shift first around new values, new principles for the future, new goals. And then you have to build the systems that align with that. Right?
Okay.
And so that's what's needed.
You're in Canada, in Montreal. You said that you have customers, clients that you've worked with in both the U.S. and Canada. What's the biggest difference between working with American governments and Canadian governments?
It's a hard, that is very, as a Canadian, I work mostly with Canadian governments and international governments.
Yeah.
U.S. governments, not as much, sometimes collaborating in certain pieces of work, but it's a little different in terms of the requirements as a Canadian to work in the U.S.
No, but just like the mindset, the attitude, the way that the way that the Americans go about things and the way that Canadians go about things. Is it different, remarkably different, or just, kind of the same?
You know what? It's hard to say, to be honest, because I think governments, and I work a lot with defense and security organizations, they assume they know what the problem is.
Okay.
They already know what the problem is. They already have the solution, right? And with a complex system that is very interdependent and very dynamic, it's important to take a step back and examine, do we really know what the problem is here? Or are we looking at it from an expanded perspective, more of a holistic systems viewpoint, as opposed to very specific small part of the system? So that's a common issue that I see across a lot of not just governments, but business organizations. They're thinking very operational, very, very short term, very narrow focus, and they're not seeing the bigger picture. There's a lot of blind spots.
Okay.
And so they're then, when disruption happens, they're anxious because they never anticipated. They didn't see it coming. They didn't think about it. They thought, oh, that's never going to happen. Right. And they never thought to challenge their assumptions.
Well, but let's get back to what I'm trying to get at is there a difference between the way, U.S. governments think and the way Canadian governments think when you start off, or all governments?
I guess at the political level, I think there is a difference at the political level, but it depends on who's in power.
Yeah.
Right. Different personalities. And I think different personalities bring in a different style of leadership. And so you see, you'll see that ripple effect of that for sure.
But you don't get a job and go, oh, no, I have to work with the Americans again.
I love working with Americans. And I have worked on a few different collaborative projects with the U.S. And it's been a really great experience because you get to hear it from, a perspective from a different viewpoint.
Right. And is it remarkably different? Like, do you start off from a different place with, it's two different kinds of governments, the Canadian government, the U.S. government. Do you start from a different place?
I think sometimes you do, depending on the context. So from an emergency management perspective, I do see a big difference.
What is that difference?
Well, I think what I've seen in my experience, and this is not some deep study, but just not based on my personal experience, is that, in the U.S., there's a different structure with emergency management. You had FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that has been going through a lot of disruption and change, right?
Sure. Yep.
We have the similar kind of process where we have different levels, but we have a lot of local and provincial type of focus in emergency management. We do have a federal agency, Public Safety Canada, but it's a different type of role and structure in terms of relationships, right? So I guess to say that it's all very context specific in terms of what we're talking about, right? It's a really hard question to answer. Because
yes,
it really is. Like, it depends on what we're talking about, the topic, the politics of the day, what's happening, how empowered.
Okay. I was just trying to get an overall feel if there's a big difference between the U.S. and Canada.
I think right now there is, for sure, on the geopolitical side. Yes, in terms of tone and political stance and our outlook on economic outlooks, collaboration outlooks. It's a very different tone that's happening, that's coming from different political ideologies and different political personalities. So I think that does have a ripple effect across the board. Okay.
So we're going to get to your true thoughts on government in just a moment. The Good Government Show is sponsored by Our. That's OUR for Our Community. Get involved. We hear that all the time from government leaders. Our co-brands with your government's name and logo. Your staff and the people you serve are connected and part of your community. From any device, your members provide reliable data and meaningful feedback. Ask a question like, do we want more parkland or better homeless services? More engaged conversations come through the Our app. Visit Ourco, that's OURCO.com, and book a demonstration. Once you wrap up this episode of The Good Government Show, give a listen to our friends over at Good News for Lefties. This daily podcast highlights news stories that show there's more good news out there. Other people in government are really trying to do the right thing. That's Good News for Lefties. Listen where you're listening now. I want to ask you a few questions that I ask lots of government leaders. Interesting perspective from you as you're not in government anymore, although you used to be. Define good government. What is it?
A good government is one that has strong governance structure, so that they have they got good awareness. They're anticipatory, right? So they understand what's changing, what's happening. They are able to operate effectively today. And if they're not operating effectively, they're able to problem solve to understand where the breakdowns are happening and how they can improve that. They are agile. They are anticipating change, and they are agile enough to know that we need to shift. We can't just stay with status quo. We need to make some changes moving forward, and then they can take action and adapt. And there's transparency and there's accountability built in.
Piece of cake. All those things are simple. No problem.
It's not easy. It is not easy, but it comes from principles of how you operate within a system. I mean, I when I worked in government, I led multi-million-dollar projects where I did have to implement something new. And it was in the health portfolio. And it was a good news type of project, but I was pushing against the current system. And there are people that are very attached to the old system. It works for them. You know, they fear change. They don't like anything new. They don't know if they'll have the same security in a new model. Maybe their job might change. So change is very uncomfortable. You have to help people through that change process, and to find out how, if their job is being changed, what that change is and how they will be supported into a new role moving into the future. So there's a reskilling and there's almost like a mind shift too that needs to happen in terms of being more agile and adaptive in a very complex, dynamic and volatile world, right?
How do you explain to citizens who don't like the change they're seeing, because no one likes change, that it's good for them? And if people are frustrated by what they're seeing, you know, what should they do?
For citizens that are very uncomfortable with change, I would say instead of staying in the background, right, and just being a critic, I would say get involved. If there is something that you are passionate about, get involved and be part of the dialogue. Find a way to be part of that process, because a lot of times, you know, change will happen and you know, sometimes people aren't involved. Citizens aren't involved in the way they should be in these types of decisions, right? So I would say get involved. Don't be a bystander. And if it's important to you, you know, find a way to have your voice heard. See where you can make an impact.
What attracted you to go into working in government and continues to this day, although in a different role?
So I came from the healthcare sector. I worked as a respiratory therapist for many years in hospital, critical care and trauma. The SARS crisis was a big turning point for me professionally. I was studying public policy at the time because I really wanted to improve the future. I really wanted to improve health system delivery in the future. And then I moved into government. And I had a 12-year, career in government, worked in a variety of different departments and with different leaders who were championing change. And it was not easy. Those projects needed a lot of commitment
right.
from the politicians, from the senior leaderships, from the staff, a lot of commitment. But I was very fortunate because I got to see what that looked like and the challenges behind the scene and how you have to be persistent and you have to really have strong clarity on what are the principles, values you're trying to shape and why you're doing it. Because, you know, once you will hit resistance, 100%, but you need to be able to know how to move around those issues to still move forward in that future direction, right? So the vision has to be compelling, has to be strong enough, and have to have good leadership. And so for me, when I moved over into health emergency management, this is where I start to think even more about the future, about all of the challenges, all of the crisis, all of the needs at the local level. And if we can anticipate and make sense of a shifting landscape, we can make better decisions for the future. And perhaps we don't have to respond to as many crises. Maybe we can be positioned in a better place for society. That was my, and for me, it's been a constant journey of learning to work with clients and governments and private sector and helping them to build these leadership skills for the future.
So 12 years in government, and now you continue working with government as an outside consultant. What would you like people to know about government, especially from your perspective as someone who helps government plan for the future? What would you like people to know about that?
There's a lot of people working in government that are really passionate about what they do, and they want to create a better future, that they want to help. They went into government with the goal and the objective of making a difference, of helping people, of creating a better society. And sometimes, when the reality of working in structures like that, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of challenges. It can be really difficult, and so I feel I still work with people who are championing change. And those are the ones that I love working with the most, because they are really committed to the process and they're prepared for the challenges, and it doesn't deter them. It just helps them to kind of take a step back and figure out how they're going to still push forward. So there are a lot of people that are passionate, that love what they do. They want to serve. They want to make a difference. And I was one of those people, and I still am to this day.
Okay. So here's a question I usually ask mayors about their city, and it gives them a chance to talk a little bit about their city. But you're the second Canadian we've ever had on the show. We had a mayor from Canada on. Yes, so welcome. And the question I ask them, and you're in Montreal, I will ask you this. I have been to Montreal, but it's been a long, long, long time. If I'm coming to Montreal, what's the one thing I must try? What's the dish of Montreal?
Oh, if you're coming to Montreal,
yes,
you have to try poutine.
Well, of course.
Poutine, right? Of course. But not like, there's many different types of poutine, right? So, it's like the fries with the gravy and the cheese curds, but you can get like variations of poutine that are quite delicious.
What's your favorite variation then?
Oh, I had this buffalo chicken poutine.
Okay.
Fantastic, right? Very different, different. Also, another thing that I've learned, because I just moved to Montreal a year ago. So Montreal is new for me.
Okay.
But what I've learned is that there's a really amazing community of different people from Lebanon, from Syria, from the Middle East, that have this incredible food, that you can get such tasty Moroccan dishes, Middle Eastern type dishes here. And the flavors are spectacular. And and so I enjoy that. But what I enjoy about Montreal the most is that it's a little bit different. It's got a European charm. It's got that. People love the summer. They go outside, they picnic in the park, they bring their wine, and they just enjoy life, because it's very cold here in the winter. So you need to enjoy the summer.
So you get your short summer in when you can.
Absolutely.
So this is the Good Government Show. We always bring it back to good government. You've been working with government for a long time. Tell me about a project that you were involved in that you're really proud of, that's really a nice showcase for good government.
One of the projects I am really proud of is a project I did in collaboration with the Archipelago of Design, which is a defense and security collaborative. And this project was all on it was for the Prime Minister's Office and Global Affairs Canada, who was tasked with helping to shape the policy around the future NATO Climate Change and Security Center of Excellence. So my project was one piece of a bigger piece for Global Affairs Canada, where we did an external consultation globally with climate change and security experts around the world, for all the way from international development to security to emergency response to defense and the military. And we had a series of workshops. We helped to capture that collective intelligence across this group, and then to analyze and make sense of it and feed that information back into global affairs. So their steering committee could take that piece of information, with all of the other expert information that was coming in order to make a decision to implement in policy. And today we have the NATO Climate Change and Security Center of Excellence in Montreal.
Okay. Well, then I guess you did good. That was good government.
We did good.
We
did good. And it showed the power, though, of collective intelligence done well, and being able to make sense of that information in a way that's usable for government to take action on. So that's what we did exceptionally well.
All right. Well, that does sound like good government. So thank you for that. Thank you for helping internationally. So Donna Dupont of Purple Compass, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you and talking about the future.
Thank you, David. This was a great conversation.
Good. Well, that's what we try for on the Good Government Show. We will talk again, and we will talk in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
After you get done with this episode, hear more good government stories with our friends at How to Really Run a City. Former mayors Kasim Reed of Atlanta and Michael Nutter of Philadelphia, and their co-host, journalist and author Larry Platt, talk with guests and other mayors about how to really get stuff done in cities around the nation. Check them out where you're listening now or through their nonprofit news site, thephiladelphiacitizen.org/podcasts. Disruptors. Plan for the disruptors. Good advice from Donna Dupont, a futurist who's always looking forward. A good conversation about how government adapts to future plans. I like when she said you have to have a future-forward vision, a vision that looks at all aspects that may affect the future, but is flexible enough to change and adapts as you move forward. So a good strategy about the best path forward, and I think she made a good case for governments working with consultants. At least when you hear about governments hiring outside consultants, you don't have to immediately think, that's just a waste of money, because it's not. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Please like us and share us with your friends and review us right here where you're listening. And check out our website, goodgovernmentshow.com, for extras. Help us keep telling stories of good government in action everywhere. Join us again for another episode right here. I'm Dave Martin, and this is The Good Government Show. The Good Government Show is a Valley Park production. Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder are the executive producers. Our show is edited and produced by Jason Stershic. Please subscribe, then share us, and like us and review us. That's the best way to make sure we're able to keep telling these stories of our government working for all of us. Then listen to the next episode of The Good Government Show.